companies of the world, what's a company that comes in your mind? Apple, sure, great example, another one. Microsoft, very good, very good. Great examples where we call this in the financial marketplace, a company that is too big to fail, or a bank, for example, a big international bank. Intesa, for example, could be too big to fail because they're too big. And what that means is that governments recognize that the businesses are so big that if they fail, they will, everybody ever played a game called dominoes where you knock one over and the next and the next and the next? This is the idea of too big to fail, where politicians say, we cannot let Apple fail. If we let Apple fail, it'll set off one domino, it'll go to the next. Pretty soon, not only in America, but in Asia, and then it'll come through Europe. We'll have all of this disruption. The failure of the company will cause, and so the government say if a company is too big to fail, we can never let that happen. We have to be ready to step in and help. But same question, this is kind of a related idea of moral hazard. What is the problem with that mentality? If we say something is too big to fail, what could be the problem with that approach? Yes. That if you finance a company that is paid to get something. Exactly, yeah. Very good, excellent. Anything else? What else is the problem? That's exactly right. If it's too big to fail, what about accountability? If you're running a company that's too big to fail, do you care whether you make mistakes? I mean, what would you knew that there would be no consequences. Yeah. Yeah. So these are the challenges today in the financial world. That, so if you are a company and all of a sudden you say, I have to be accountable to the investors who have invested money in my company, I have to be accountable to the public, I have to be accountable if the government is giving me money, and you have to balance all of these things that compete for our attention, okay? And so these are the things that we think about in today's financial markets. And so I wanted to introduce these two concepts because I'm going to give us a hypothetical, a case study that we're going to work on together. And let me go forward just a little bit. Who loves Homer Simpson? I love Homer Simpson, so I always put him in my lectures. So I'm going to give you, we call it a scenario. In SSM, when we teach our courses, we call case studies. We use, this happens to be a case study that I created that we'll go through together, because then I'm going to ask you, we're going to have a discussion about it. Sometimes we use real cases, and sometimes we use what we call hypothetical. This particular one tends to be a hypothetical, but I created this scenario based on things that have happened in the real world. So let's walk through this together. Can everybody see this okay? It's, I know it's, we'll walk through it together. So I want you to think about this scenario. Here are the facts that I want you to consider, okay? So there is a bank. A bank is business. There's a bank, and the bank is called XYZ. Makes it easy. Think of the last three letters of the American alphabet. And it's a bank that works, it exists in the middle of the United States. You think of the United States in the middle, it's kind of a small town, not a big, like New York or Los Angeles, but in the middle of the United States. And it's a small town. This is important for when we think about moral hazard. And so this bank has a bad history. Why does this bank have a bad history? So this bank has a history of making what we call very bad, very risky loans. We know that banks loan money to people. So if you want to buy a car or you want to buy an apartment, you want to borrow money, you go to the bank and you say, hello, my name's Lisa Marchese. I would like to borrow money to buy this car. And then they would ask me, what kinds of questions would they ask me? What would they want to know about me before they decided to give me money? Do I work? Sure. What else? Do I pay my bills, right? Am I responsible? Have I ever not paid a bill? So they want to look at me to make sure that I'm a good person to loan money to, that I will repay the money. Makes sense, right? So this bank, however, has a history of someone comes into the bank, they don't have a job, they don't have a good history of repaying loans, but the bank says, oh, we'll loan you money, but we'll charge a higher interest rate. Okay, so it's but the loan, guess what happens? The person doesn't repay the loan, and that costs the bank money. Right? Bank loses and they have to take action to try to recover it. So this bank has a history of very risky, dangerous lending practices. Okay? Everybody follow the hypothetical so far? Okay. And in the past, when the bank has decided to do these things, the government has come in and helped them out. The government has given the bank money. And why has the government done this? Because there's only one bank in this small part of the United States. And if this bank fails, then people won't have the opportunity to have a bank. So the government has decided in the past to give them money. So what happens? Recently, this bank has run into problems again because a number of the loans that they've made to people have failed. People have decided not to repay the bank these loans, okay? And now they've gone back to the government and they've said, we need $1 billion to cover the losses from all of our bad loans, okay? So now the government is saying, we have a problem. If this bank fails, it will cause other companies to go out of business. It will put a lot of people out of work. It will have really, really difficult, challenging consequences, okay? So does everybody kind of have the scenario in mind? Any questions? Okay, so here's what I want us to think about. Okay? 5 questions. First question is, in this scenario, in your own words, as you think about this, what do you think the moral hazard is here? What's wrong? And put aside the business terms. This is kind of, we can look at this and what we feel, our instincts about what's wrong with, as we say in English, what's wrong with this picture? What bothers you the most about this scenario? We have a bank that keeps making bad decisions, hasn't changed its behavior. We have the government keeps stepping in. What do you think is the thing, in your own opinion, that you think is the worst about this? If the government keeps giving them money, that's our money. We pay taxes. They're taking the money we pay in taxes and they keep giving it to this bank. What's the most bothersome thing about this?
Money to the wrong people.
Yeah, first, okay, money's going to the wrong people, sure. Very good. What else? There's many things. I like that one. What else? How do you make somebody, if somebody's doing something against the law or is doing bad things, what is the way that we get that person to change their action or their behavior? Consequences, right? If somebody breaks the law, they have to pay a fine or go to jail. If somebody does something wrong, we make them understand the consequences. In this scenario, are there any consequences for the bank? Any consequences at all? Yeah.
The people is going to protest because they are not going to
Yeah.
bank, but to another company.
So one thing is the people can protest, they can say, we're gonna take our money out of this bank and maybe find another one. Unfortunately, in this particular area of the United States, there's only one bank. But you're right, that could be something. But for the people that are running the bank, are there any consequences at all for the man or the woman that's in charge of the bank? No, right? They say, we can keep loaning money, we can keep doing these risky things because we get in trouble, the government comes and helps us out. Okay, so here's the tension that we have, and I want to know, which do you think is more important? For the government to keep spending money to keep the bank open, or for the government to protect jobs? Should the government protect jobs? Yes. Okay. What about, should the government keep giving money to the bank, even though they'll keep doing the same thing? What do you think? You're all now in the government, and what would you do? Would you require the bank to do certain things before you give them money? Could that be one way you could maybe stop this, we call it the cycle, the vicious cycle, where nothing is changing? What could be something you could say if you were a politician, you were the government, you were saying, we have to stop, we can't just keep giving you money. But I'm the bank and say, well, if you don't give us money this time, we're gonna close our doors and it's gonna cause all of this problem in our economy. What could be something you could say to the bank, the person like me? What would you say to me? You say, well, different, before we give money again. What could you require of the bank to break out of this moral hazard situation? Any ideas? How about say, how about we find a new leader for the bank? You obviously are not going to change what you do. The government can say, we want you to have a new leader. We want you to stop making loans that cause problems. Okay? Any other thoughts or ideas? Yes.
The government can say to the bank, if you don't change your mind, we can don't give you money and ask for another company to open up the bank.
Outstanding, outstanding. I love that answer. You know why? There was a bank failure, and a lot of this is based on that's a great answer, because that's exactly what the government did. There is a bank called Silicon Valley Bank, or SVB. This is a bank that loaned money to firms, to startup firms, into like the tech firms, and they started doing very risky things. They said, I don't think you are at a good risk for this loan, but we're gonna loan you the money anyways. We're gonna charge a high interest rate, meaning we'll make a lot of money when you repay the loan. So they started doing all sorts of risky things. And guess what? In March of this year, earlier this year, people started defaulting on their loans. The economy became a bit of a challenge, and Silicon Valley Bank was in trouble. And they went to the government. They said, help, we need billions, we need money. And in this particular case, the government responded by saying, we are going to force you to sell. And a new bank came in, and now they are restructuring, bringing in new management, and the bank is now opened as with different owners, but that's exactly what happened. And that's a great way for the government to try to manage this moral hazard. Great answer. Any other thoughts, ideas before we look at another scenario? Who do you think is most important in the worker, the taxpayer? What do you feel the most strongly about in this scenario? Protecting workers, protecting tax money? What do you think is most important? Yes.
I think workers, because they product a lot of money at times.
Yeah, so I mean that's a very good point, because if people are unemployed, disoccupazione costs a lot of money because people aren't working, they're not paying taxes, and then it increases the burden on the government. Okay. Any other thoughts or ideas? Okay, so this scenario gives you an introduction to what we call moral hazard, the challenges that the financial markets have to confront when business people behave badly, when business people become very greedy, and it ends up disrupting the markets that businesses can go to borrow money to expand their companies. So I want to look at a final, and then we'll go ahead and take a break. So this next scenario is the scenario that we call something that's too big to fail. Apple, Amazon, Samsung, think of the big companies. And in the case of a bank, for example, we have a bank that is too big to fail because they're operating in too many places. They have too many people that have investments. So we have this idea that we're too big to fail. So on the one hand, in the first scenario, we looked at a bank that was operating in a very small part of the United States, and they were the only bank, the only opportunity for people. So kind of presented one challenge. Now we're looking at a company that's too big to fail, that idea of too big to fail. So what does this scenario involve? So I want you to think, I used the first 3 letters of the American alphabet for this scenario, so it's easy to keep in mind. ABC is a big multinational bank. They have banks in several countries. We call them branches. Okay? And so ABC, because it's a big bank, has decided to lend money to big companies all over the world. Okay? And they decided, so when we say a company is risky, a company that they may not have a lot of money, but they're a big company, they have a lot of debt, for example, we call those risky investments, because the same as an individual. If somebody doesn't have money, I owe a lot of money to other people. Like if you knew that I owed 10 people money, and I come to you and I say, could you loan me 100 euros? What would you say to me? See, you'd say no, because it's like, come on, why would I loan Professor Marchese money? She owes all these other people money. Okay, So we call this, I'm a risky investment. Means if you decide to give me money, you know that it's very risky because I owe all these other people money. So one of the ways that the financial market tries to, address or, meet this issue is you say, all right, professor, you're very risky. I don't know about you, but I'll loan you the money, but instead of 5% interest, you're gonna have to pay me 20%. In other words, 100 euros plus 20%, which is, the cost. So what does this mean in practical terms? It means businesses see, wow, if we make these risky loans, we have the possibility of earning more money, 20% instead of 5%. Sounds good, right? What's the problem with that? What's the danger to your company if you decide, well, I'm gonna make a lot of high-risk loans? I'm gonna loan these big companies that have a lot of debt, we'll loan them. What's the risk to you if you decide to start making high-risk loans to these companies? What happens? You loan my company money and you know I'm high risk. And on paper, it says you're gonna make 20%. What happens when I don't pay you back? You don't get the money, and all of a sudden the bank loses money. So if I've got a lot of high risk loans out, I say, I have a possibility to make a lot of money, but I also have the possibility to lose a lot of money. And if the bank loses money, so we'll take, you and I, say we all have our money in Intesa. If Intesa makes a lot of bad, risky loans, they've lost my money, your money, our money. Because all of a sudden the bank, the checking account that I have that says I have, 1,000 euro, all of a sudden it's not there anymore because the bank lost the money. It's kind of the way to think about this, and that's why governments have very strong rules on banks for how they loan money. But even so, big banks that operate in many parts of the world can have the possibility of making high-risk loans. So going back to this scenario, our bank, ABC, has decided to make a lot of high-risk loans to big companies around the world. And because of its size, ABC is considered it's too big to fail. If it fails, it's kind of like Apple. One domino goes, the next, so on. Okay, so in this scenario, there are signs. You are a government regulator, and you're reviewing ABC Bank, and you see that there are warning signs. You know, when a red light flashes, we say in English, it means danger is coming. You're looking at their financial records, and you say there are clear signs that this bank is about to fail, okay? So here's the question. What do we do in this situation? And we'll kind of simplify these questions. In this scenario, with ABC Bank about to fail, and we'll say the United States, you work for the government regulator in the United States, and ABC is now coming and asking for money. What's the first thing you would think to yourself in response? Do we give the bank money, or do we say no? How many say give the bank money if they're about to fail? Okay. How many say no? Okay. How many are undecided? Okay. So for those that say give the bank money, tell me what you're thinking.
I mean, if you give bank the money, if the bank goes in debt, all the economy starts to get Yeah.
Yeah, people lose their jobs, so we're looking at the consequences. Any other reasons? Yes, what do you think?
I think that if you, industry to be failed, the economy of the country is based on
Uh-huh,
this industry, so you have to find.
okay, so in other words, the dangers are too great. Okay, and we're gonna come to the other side, now, for those that voted yes, any other reasons? Any other ideas? Okay, how about the ones that said no?
So, sure.
Okay,
And, I don't increase,
well, you believe, okay.
I don't believe to be.
Oh, very good. I love this.
When it's troppo bello essere vero,
Mhm.
like, you can lose all, it's not sure that you win something.
Right, right,
The loser is
yeah,
important question to discuss.
okay. Very good, because, you know, these two opposing views are exactly what people on Wall Street have a debate about. Many of the critics say there's no such thing as too big to fail. Exactly what your opinion is, and there's others that say the risks are too great. What about the people that are undecided? What is the most difficult part about making the decision? Tell me why you're undecided. I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. Yes,
I'm not decided what the protein wants to then I want to see if they're in the danger, and they want to try to take not the one they ask about apart what they were trying to come back in the business.
okay,
So I try to help him budget in wide, try to see if they can go out by himself.
okay, very good. So you would help him, but you would require the bank to do certain things.
Yeah, sure, they are in the danger, so they need the money. They just need not only for own business, so they need money for the, I don't know what to say, the profit.
Uh-huh,
So, money for the,
uh-huh, very good. No, very good idea. Any other ideas? Any other ideas? What can we say to the bank? What can we say for the government? Can we put rules in, can we give them rules for the future to stop this from happening again? Yeah,
Or you can change the staff if the problem is staff, you can change it.
yeah, we can put a new management, new leaders in to run the bank, okay? Very good. Should we prevent banks from taking big risks? Maybe that's one thing, and in fact, that's why we see in the examples, whenever a big bank failure happens, the first thing that the government does is they pass new rules, new laws that really restrict what banks can do to make loans. Okay? So these are some of the challenges. These two scenarios are very real world challenges that we have, because if you're a business and all of a sudden the bank doesn't have money to loan, or investors don't have money to loan, what happens to your ability to grow your business? Does it impact you? Yeah, because no money's gonna be available. Investors won't have money available to loan to businesses, and that's why in our studies, we have to understand the relationship between banks and the government and companies, because all of this is where companies have to go to support their businesses. And so if you all, run your own businesses someday, you wanna sell a business, you wanna buy a business, you're gonna have to understand how the financial markets work and what are the challenges that everyone has to confront in the market to obtain money to run your business. And so these are just a couple of the challenges that we look at as we explore, people that have money to invest in small company startups, the Teslas before they were Tesla, or an existing company that's about to fail, where they go to find money to help them from failing. In both of these situations, interestingly enough, in a venture capital, if I'm going to invest in a small tech company, usually I'm going to tell them, I want you to do this, or this, or this for my money. Or if I'm a big company and I have investors that come in to save my company, they are going to tell me, in order for us to loan you money, Lisa, you need to have a new management team. You need to change this, and change this. In other words, they are going to come in and try to reduce the risk as much as possible, okay? But in order for us to manage our own businesses, we have to know how the capital markets work and what the challenges are. And so these two small exercises are a way to try to introduce you to these ideas and these concepts. So I realize it's kind of a complicated argument, but doing it in a way that maybe you can think about, in your own experiences when it comes to a business. The next time we're out shopping now for the holidays, right? So when you go into a store, you think about, Euronics or another store started as a small idea and grew, it became big, and kind of thinking about the money and the resources that all these companies needed in order to grow. And this is really what we explore here in our class. Because without the financial markets, we would not have all of the companies, the family companies, the big companies, the small companies. None of those would exist in our world today without venture capital, private equity, and what we call healthy, good financial markets. And that's what we talk about. Any questions, anyone? Okay, well, we are gonna feed you a little bit, so, and let's go ahead, and we've been at it for about an hour, let's go ahead and take a break. And I think Stefano will wanna come back and chat with you a little bit more. And I think we have some refreshments here, so we'll go ahead and take a break, and I'll be here if you have any questions too. But I want to thank you all. It was really a pleasure to get to speak with you all this morning. And we hope that if you're interested in visiting again, we're always more than happy to have you sit in on other classes. But this is kind of how we structure our lessons. And so if anybody has any questions, let me know. Welcome to SSM, and let's go ahead and take a break. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please help yourselves. We brought everyone refreshments.
Prego. Facciamo così.
Diamo
Oh.
una che così è più semplice.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Mi darebbe più soldi per investire.
Dove spendere?
Great presentation.
Oh, thank you. It's very nice to meet you, Enrico.
Very nice to meet you.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of been a crazy morning. Glad you're here and we have a
No
chance
worries.
to.
Yeah,
You were up at Newton earlier.
Oh, sorry?
You went to Newton first.
Yeah.
Oh,
My
so-
bad, because I understood it was they could have been there, but no problem, I arrived there.
Oh, okay.
Anyways,
So well, this is, what I should do.
everything was very useful in today's class because we were talking about actual business, actual real life. So
Oh, yeah, that's the.
I really appreciate it, yeah.
Oh, good, good, because you kind of see, everybody has a different approach.
Great pleasure, yeah.
Have you met Stefano?
Yeah, now I think that he's talking to someone, but then we're gonna
Okay.
have
Okay, perfect, perfect.
great idea also the case scenarios.
Yeah, so we do those because they're really, they're a lot easier to teach with. than this one.
Yeah, I agree. In addition to interaction with the class, you can learn more, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, did you want something to eat? There's, we have,
I'm fine, thank you.
oh, thank you for your good questions and your participation.
Yeah, because I think in a given situation, if government have to do something with a big bank,
Uh-huh.
they can't really do what we say because they have to know if they use if they give the money to the bank and what they profit from them.
Uh-huh.
So they have to give some
Yeah.
for the our partner for make sure they keep making money for them and for us with some I don't know how to say it. What to say in the first, like I give 100, they want back 20% of the
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, the big risk, you charge the high interest, yeah.
Yeah, because I think the best way to make sure a bank don't fail is make sure that you can open a filiale.
Uh-huh, so like a branch,
In some place in our company, in
Uh-huh.
our country, for I can have the money from you and you can keep stay alive.
exactly, yeah, yeah. So, no, these are the, if you're running the business, you say, oh, we have the possibility of making all this money. And kind of think about the possibility instead of the risk, but we have to really think
I
about.
prefer to see it by the government because I want to go to money sites.
Uh-huh.
So I try to make the view of.
Oh, yeah, sure, the government makes the policies, the rules, so
Yeah.
very important.
I think this is a better way to make something, some bank or in general, some company like that. Give them the money, but with profit back.
Right, right.
And make sure that they can continue producing my company, my
Uh-huh.
country,
Yeah, yeah, very good.
for don't lose way to money.
Yeah, exactly. And you, but as a politician, you have to be very, very, you have to be a custodian of the money because it's everybody's money.
You have to know how to keep money, to use it, and the risk is
Yeah, in the best way for the most people. So, yeah, these are the very difficult decisions that
I know.
we always have to think about. So anyways, well, I really enjoyed your questions and your participation. Were really great. Thank you.
Ti stimolare anche
Ah, no, sono molto
che
felice.
non è facile, non è facile
Sì, no,
perché
gambe.
alcuni hanno vedere questa intelligenza, mi sembra che
Ah, grazie.
erano presenti sulla materia.
Ah, ma grazie, è un po' difficile a volte.
Beh, sì, è un tema che magari non
tradurre-
si discute così direttamente,
Ma sono tutti in gambe. Molto
per
intelligente.
l'individualità molto interessante.
Sì, i commenti sono
Magari
molto.
hanno storie, magari a volte ne fanno anche scolastico alle spalle, ma con una qualità intellettiva buona.
Sì, anche è vero.
Eccellente, sì.
E che devi lei insegnare?
Sì, lettere, no, tutt'altro ambito, anche se mi interessa molto l'ambito economico, non sia una chiave del futuro, una chiave del presente e del futuro.
Ah, ok, capito. Lei studiano economia in generale?
No, è un liceo scientifico, dottoressa.
Wow.
Fa ragione generale con la
Scienze,
matematica, fisica,
ok.
informatica e poi ambito
Io ho
umanistico.
mentalità americana perché le nostre scuole scientifiche ci studiamo economia, matematica.
Sì, sì. La loro è proprio un liceo generico, si chiama scientifico proprio perché affronta potenzialmente matematico fisico.
Questo è fondamentale.
Invece per la loro lingua, cosa dice? La loro lingua inglese è comprensibile quando interagiscono, sì?
Sì.
Si fanno capire, si fanno capire. Sì.
Allora parlano in inglese. Allora studiano anche
Sì, tutte le materie inglesi. Perché il collega di inglese mi ha detto di ascoltare come parlavano. Grazie.
Sì, grazie mille.
E l'analisi dei casi è molto interessante.
Grazie mille.
Concreto.
Grazie mille.
Grazie, buon lavoro.
Torna di nuovo perché sarebbe un piacere.
Avremo l'occasione. Grazie mille.
Hey, went well. Is everybody online? I couldn't tell who was online.
Filippo Leonardo,
And no Sophia? Okay. Should I go upstairs? I can go upstairs and finish class or I can. No, I can, or I can go in the office there. Okay, I'll do that. I can give this back to you. And phone went okay, worked okay, the phone, taking pictures?
Yeah, I've got it right here. Sorry.
No, I don't want to forget. It's got, half my life is on this. All right, I'll just go next door and I won't disturb you if, okay, perfect. Sure, thank you. No, because if they're online, it'll work, so.
Okay, cool.
We haven't heard from Sophia. Hey, hope she shows up for a final. She's gonna be repeating the course.
Let's see.
Ci vediamo. Okay.
Scusa,
mi trovi un PowerPoint, quello solito, sì, da mettere sulla...
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Happy that must be research. We share the same passion. Without repetition, without no, it's not education, it's one. Number one, because young people is, we were talking about assets. And our main some people say that young people, kids are messages that we send to a future that we will never be able to see. This is a quote from Renzo Piano, one of the greatest architects we've had in the world. He says, young people are lost. There are other messages that we send to the future that we will never be able to see. Somebody else says, when you are gone, you know what dawn is? Yeah. They are the centuries of dawn. I giovani sono quelli che vengono a trovare solo di moneta, perché tentiamo a concentrarci un po'. Questa è veloce seconda parte. Ice West. What happens how we got.
I don't know where they are out there. I think they're still on. Okay. The internet's good here. Yes, upstairs, so.
Yeah, we can basically do it right here.
Okay. I'm gonna mute my microphone to say this for a quick.
I'm ready.
Me too.
Hey, guys. Who's with me?
Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Leonardo, good to see you. Is
Hello.
Filippo's back?
Yes.
Okay, so in this last class, what I had done, you saw from the lecture notes, we're kind of coming back to, looking at the financial crisis in the financial markets. We kind of started the class with this. We're going to come back to it now when we look at, kind of what we do a whole 360, and we come back and we look at kind of the challenges that businesses have to confront. So I always do this for the last class because it allows us to, have time to talk about the final exam and the final presentation. And so we'll go back and we'll take a closer look at the Lehman Brothers. We're going to look at Silicon Valley. We'll talk about that. But before we do, maybe what we'll do now is we can get your presentation completed. This is the last of the homework assignments, and then we can talk a little bit about, some of the financial crises that we've seen and the impact on the markets. And then I'll set aside time to talk about our final exam so we can make a schedule for next Tuesday to complete.
So the final exam is next Tuesday.
Yes, final exam is next Tuesday.
Okay.
And so we can talk about that before we break today. I can go over any questions you guys have, and we can, make sure that everybody's prepared. So is our sound good? I'm in another area where I think the internet is pretty good. Can you guys hear me okay? Everything's good in our connection?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Do you guys want to go ahead with your presentation?
Yeah, if you give me just like 5 minutes, that I'll just find it and
Okay.
just fix 2 things that I thought about now, and then
Okay.
I'm ready.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Let me see if I can make you the host, and then you can share it.
I can do that.
Okay.
Okay, and
Cool.
okay, it's working.
Okay, perfect.
Everybody can share.
Okay, so now everybody can share. When you're ready, Filippo or Leonardo, whoever, you can share the screen.
Yes, I'm following with my phone.
Okay.
So for me, it's difficult to present. The
Okay, no
presentation.
problem.
Per cui i due cattivi se riescono a attira verso il e poi il pomeriggio si è giovedì per venerdì sul bianco. No, no, venerdì. Quindi venerdì ci sarà di là Flavio. No, no, sicuramente. Quindi, anche noi in mondo di raggiungere di che magari vogliamo erano occupati, ci sono in una invece un po' così. Bisogna sapere che
Ciao, ci vediamo la prossima martedì. Ci vediamo. Ok, allora martedì. Buona settimana, a presto.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right,
Thank you for the time.
No
Just needed
problem.
to fix and read a couple of things, but I'm ready.
no problem.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Didn't realize it. It's here. Can you see it?
Okay, I can see it now.
All right, give me 1 second. Animazione. Okay.
Okay, I can see it.
Ok, Leo, ci dividiamo a... io faccio la prima acquisizione, tu fai la seconda, o io faccio la
Ok,
seconda, tu la prima, e
per me è
dopo
uguale,
facciamo insieme, va bene?
come preferisci te.
Ok, let's do like this then. Okay, strategic acquisitions in focus.
Mhm,
This was the homework on integration, where
mhm,
we had to evaluate 2 deals.
mhm,
In this case, we decided to do the preservation and holding deals, but
mhm,
you'll see it now. And we have first Coca-Cola's acquisition of Innocent Drinks,
mhm,
which is the first of the two. It's a
right,
preservation.
uh-huh.
And sorry, I need to move your your head because otherwise I don't see it. Okay. So acquisition overview, it's pretty simple. In 2019, Coca-Cola acquired the majority stake in Innocent Drinks for $330 million. Innocent Drinks was renowned for natural and healthy beverages, including smoothies and juices. And this was basically done, as you know, Coca-Cola is a holding that has under many different things like Fanta, Sprite, San Pellegrino, and many others. And this was just an addition to their and most people kind of agree or argue that it was done to deter competition. So it was like Coca-Cola acquired Innocent Drinks to enforce their market share and their market power.
Okay,
This was just a fun fact. Anyway, integration, evaluation, Innocent Drinks. The objective, there was a stated objective, which was increased market presence in the healthy beverage segment. But as for many think it was an excuse, but this is not what we're going to go into. And how leveraging Coca-Cola's extensive global distribution network. So they wanted to use Innocent Drinks production to leverage their own global distribution network and all the channels they had in order to dispense also Innocent Drinks. Then we have financial impact, which was an increase in profitability, of course. Positive impact due to expanded distribution and cross-selling, as they sell in, I cannot even count how many countries and how many different channels they do for distribution. And cost savings, it was achieved through operational synergies and streamlining production, of course, as Coca-Cola had the and the possibilities. Streamline the production of Innocent Drinks and incorporate the Innocent Drinks into their own production, so to save some costs also for them. And then we have customer and employee impact. There was a limited loss, as there was minimal customer and employee attrition. This was found, I did not put the bibliography, but this was found through different articles in internet saying that the two surprisingly got together pretty nice without attrition, despite the predictions that many experts thought that the two wouldn't have come together because of the different products they made, right? Because one makes how do you call them? I said it before, sorry, it doesn't come to mind. One makes healthy drinks, and the other
Yeah.
one Coca-Cola, which is like for each cup that you drink, it's like 6 teaspoons of sugar.
Yeah,
So
very sugary, very high
Yeah.
calorie, high.
so many experts thought that there could have been attrition mainly for this reason, but it did not work the way they planned. And it was a smooth transition as operations smoothly integrated, minimizing disruptions as it was successful. Then we have company culture. There was a positive impact because there was shared commitment to health and sustainability values, which links to what I was saying before about the different products they made. And
Right.
there was a competitive advantage as Coca-Cola expanded market share in the healthy beverage segment. And I'd need to specify this, there's the cow or whatever it is in the competitive advantage because it was the easiest example to explain competitive advantage when it's explained in economics. So I thought it was nice.
The cash cow, of course,
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
of course, yeah, very good.
Now we have evaluation summary. in innocent drinks, where we can say that there was a regulatory compliance that was successful, as it complied with all regulatory requirements in the beverage industry. And the due diligence from Coca-Cola was done extremely well before acquiring innocent drinks. So to make sure that all the regulations and all the limits and everything that they had to stay in, the boundaries they had to stay into, both financial and legal, were respected. And then we have communication and collaboration, which was effective due to regular collaboration between teams, ensured a smooth process in the acquisition. And now we have overall the integration of innocent drinks was successful, meeting the stated objectives with positive impacts on profitability, market share, and culture.
Okay.
And this was, yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll let you
No, I
finish.
was just giving the word to Leo, but if you have a question, then
Yeah, let me ask a question and then we'll kind of take this acquisition before we go on to the next. Why in your mind was this a preservation integration? What made it a preservation integration for
Yeah,
your analysis?
you very well. I cannot hear you very well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Let me make
A
sure I'm
little
not
bit
mute.
better.
Okay. How about now? Can you hear me?
Kind of, but if I think I can get the question if you repeat it, please.
Okay, so my question is, what in your mind made this a preservation integration strategy? What was the main objective that made it a preservation strategy?
Well, first we must say that preservation acquisition refers to mainly when a company acquires another company primarily to protect existing market share, right? And defend against threats and other companies that can get their position in the industry. Right? In the context of Coca-Cola, I think that due to the growing demand that there is actually of drinks, of energy drinks and beverage options, Coca-Cola was facing a set increased competition, and so they wanted to preserve their own market share, buying innocent drinks, and also they wanted to, let's say, protect their own bubble by expanding their products and pretending their brand identity and brand loyalty by expanding their product to also healthier products, which is actually something going into the direction of the world right now.
Okay, okay. And were there any challenges? It sounds like, if I understand your presentation, and I agree with you guys, that this was an example of a successful integration for the strategy chosen. Is that okay? What were the main challenges, from your point of view, in looking at this integration? What were the main challenges that they faced to make this was a success story?
Yeah, first I think the main one was the integration between, but can you see the screen right now or no?
Yeah, I can see the screen.
Okay. That the main thing was the cultural differences between corporates, which I think is extremely important between the two, because as we know, Coca-Cola was huge, and it's still huge, a large multinational corporation, gigantic, right? And when they acquire innocent drinks, which is smaller, of course, and it's a smaller company, we also have to take into account when the employees from a smaller company need to adapt to corporates, which I think has been the biggest challenge for them. And also maybe consumer perception, because consumers have always been used to Coca-Cola being Coca-Cola, and you drink Coca-Cola not because you want to stay healthy, but you drink Coca-Cola because you like it, and there's no discussion on it. I think that consumer perception may have been something difficult to achieve in the years, and will be something difficult to achieve for consumers to understand that Coca-Cola will also make healthy drinks. Because I think that when you want a healthy drink, you don't go to something of Coca-Cola.
You don't buy Coca-Cola, right?
Yeah, right. You don't buy something owned by Coca-Cola, at least.
Yeah. This is a really interesting for that reason, because what would have happened if Coca-Cola instead said, No, we're just going to, we're gonna absorb the company. We own it. We'll try to promote healthy drinks, innocent drinks under our name. What would have happened if they chose the wrong strategy, in
Well,
your opinion?
If they chose the wrong strategy in buying innocent drinks, you mean?
Mhm. Yeah, if they just said, we're not gonna use the innocent name anymore, we're just gonna put them under Coca-Cola. We
Oh,
own
they
the
would-
company.
I think they would have destroyed completely all the innocent drinks products.
Exactly. Yeah,
They would have
very
destroyed
good.
production.
Yeah, and that's why I like the presentation, because you illustrate the core of why a company would use this integration approach. Because if they would have taken the innocent name and replaced it with Coca-Cola, all of a sudden the innocent consumers would have said, we don't buy Coca-Cola, we buy innocent. And it would have been, you're right, a really difficult strategy. Very good. Excellent job. Very good job on this one.
And now we will move to the second part, which is
Okay.
Pfizer's acquisition of White.
Okay.
Acquisition overview. Pfizer
Mhm.
acquired within 2009 for
Mhm.
68 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Wyeth, a leading pharmaceutical company with a diverse product portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
Integration evaluation. Wyeth, state objectives. Yes. Broadened the product portfolio and R&D capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
How integrated the research and development teams to enhance the innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Financial impact mixed. Some cost savings achieved, but challenges in meeting expected profitability.
Mm-hmm.
Customer and employee impact, moderate loss, some customer and employee attrition.
Mm-hmm.
Disruption, operational challenges during integration, affecting service.
Mm-hmm.
Company culture, mixed impact, cultural classes observed affecting moral and collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Competitive advantage, yes. Strange hidden position in the pharmaceutical market, gaining a broader market share.
Okay.
Regulatory compliance, successful, complied with regulatory standards in the pharmaceutical industry.
Mm-hmm.
Communicational and collaboration, room for improvement, challenges in effective communication between diverse teams.
Mm-hmm.
The integration of with showed mixed results,
Mm-hmm.
achieving some objectives, but facing challenges in profitability, cultural
Mhm.
integration, and communication.
Mm-hmm.
Overall reflections, both acquisition had the success and challenges. Effective integration requires careful planning, communication, and cultural alignment. Continuous improvement in integration strategy is crucial for long-term success.
Okay.
Yeah, and this was basically it. It was the yeah, sorry.
Okay.
This no, ho sbagliato. I do this, and then I do
Okay.
this. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and we were saying that basically this was the conclusion on both
Uh-huh.
of those. This was more general conclusion.
Uh-huh.
While the evaluation summary, as Leo said,
Mhm.
And
So let me
Okay.
ask, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I
No.
interrupted you.
I was just saying that compared to the other one, this was facing a little bit more challenges, but also due to the market it was in. I mean, pharmaceutical market it's way different than
Mhm.
market, so it makes sense.
Okay, so why was the holding integration strategy, what was the logic for why the holding strategy was used in this acquisition with Pfizer's purchase of Wyeth?
So why was Pfizer?
Yeah, so this one is an example of the holding strategy for integration. What was the logic? Why did why did Pfizer want to use a holding strategy here of integration? So was this an appropriate strategy for what they were trying to accomplish?
Well, I think that it was definitely it had to be different compared to Coca-Cola and innocent drinks. Due
Okay.
to the fact that you're still first you're buying a company for $70 billion,
Mm-hmm.
which also highlights the dimensions of the company that you're buying,
Right.
which is extremely different from a $300 million deal between
Mhm.
Coca-Cola, which is giant, and
Mhm.
innocent. This means that for Coca-Cola, they had to teach, let's say, innocent
Mhm.
drinks employees how to work in corporates, right?
Right.
In this case, there was no need of training the human
Uh-huh.
resource
Okay.
because they were both corporates, they both knew the markets, they were both doing the same thing basically,
Mhm.
because vaccines, pharmaceuticals, and everything else, there was biotechnologies, they were all both doing the same thing. So I
Right.
think in this case, the holding strategy gave mixed results as we've seen, but
Mhm.
it was the only solution that Pfizer could have went through and to buy a company like Wyatt. Well, how do you pronounce it? I've never heard of it before the deal.
Yeah, Wyeth.
Wyatt.
Okay. Okay. So if they would have proposed, for example, if they would have proposed a symbiosis approach where we're going to be equal partners, Wyeth would not have accepted that. They wanted to keep their
Yeah,
own procedure.
identity. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. When Leonardo made reference to the fact that they lost customers and they lost people as part of the integration, I'm curious, why did that happen? Did you guys gain a sense where there was a moderate loss of some customers and some employees? Could that have been prevented, or why did that occur?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think these are the consequences of the holding strategy.
Okay.
Because due to the fact that you're not really into it, but you just hold and you
Uh-huh.
wait for us to see what happens.
Okay.
Beginning, of course, something must have gone wrong, like a moderate loss of some customer and employee attrition. Right?
Mhm.
It's obvious, but also because of the market. It's an extremely competitive market. It's a war. It's not. It's anything else.
Okay.
It's
So this would be expected if you're gonna buy, if one pharmaceutical company is gonna hold another in this strategy, because of the market, they should anticipate that there will be some loss of
course.
customer
But
and,
if you think about it, casualties are a consequence of war, right?
yeah,
And in this
that's
case,
fair
it's
analogy.
not a war on with guns and rifles, but it's a war in a market, right? So
Mhm.
casualties need to arrive in some cases, especially in these types of markets, like finance, like in the
Uh-huh.
finance, same thing.
Uh-huh.
When there is an acquisition, you must take into account that not maybe everyone will be staying, not everyone is right for the job, you don't work the way I see. I mean, there are many things that you need to consider. So I think it's normal, especially for the pharmaceutical world.
Mhm. Mhm. So the other question I had, this one is an interesting analysis. So you guys did a good job with this second one. But there was a reference that the communication was not great. There were some issues with the communication.
Here.
What were tell me a little bit more. There was room for improvement. Tell me how they could have done a better job on this aspect of the integration.
So how they could have done a better job
Yeah.
in communication. Well, first, I think that the main issue was the CEO at the moment. Because if you think about it, everything starts from the CEO, right? When there's an acquisition, when there is anything else, everything starts from the highest individual who has the job of making people go together into the company, and who doesn't go together with something else. You need to understand its importance, if you can cut, if you cannot cut, if you need to keep it or not. Yeah, simple. I think communication plans, maybe first, maybe transparency could have been, I mean, could sometimes have been forgot, especially in the world we are in and what pharmaceuticals do. So I think transparency is something
Okay.
difficult in that
Okay.
world.
Sure.
And possibly, I am, due to the fact that I don't know the dynamics, I don't know if it was a two-way approach or not, if CEOs lead actually, or CEOs just are assertive and give orders. I don't know how it works, but maybe it could have been also this type of thing, right? Where CEO says, you do this, and I decide, that's it. It's my job. You need to, it's like a military regime, possibly.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Well,
it
here's
could-
a follow-up question. You correctly said the pharmaceutical industry is very competitive. That's absolutely correct. Do you think, as a consequence, that a CEO might say, we don't want to say too much publicly because we don't want our competitors to have, so competition might push companies to not be transparent with the details of an integration strategy.
Well, companies are not transparent in that world. I mean,
Yeah.
there have been like news of companies that published false information just to just like propaganda and war, right? Same thing. It's a war. It's the same concept, same strategy, same thing. The only difference is that one is in suits and the other one is in boots and rifles, but the concept is it's the same.
Okay. So at the end of the day, you guys have done a good job of talking about two different but related integration strategies. That's why they were paired together. In your opinion, you guys, which one was the better strategy and which one was more successful?
I think Coca-Cola.
Okay. And why was that more successful?
Well, smaller deal, more profits, less impact on the mother company.
Okay. Okay, very good. Leonardo, you agree?
Yes.
Okay. All right, very good job, you guys. That is the last of the homework assignments. The two of you did a really good job on all five. I'm very pleased. Great analysis. If you could be sure to email that to me, I will make sure it's placed in Google Classroom and we have a good record of it. So here's what I want to do for the remainder of our lesson today. This is the last lesson. I want to talk with you guys about a little, a few more concepts in the lecture for today that pertain to the financial marketplace, because in particular, I wanted to speak with you guys about the lessons learned from the Silicon Valley collapse earlier this year. That's very much related to what happened with the Lehman Brothers, and you guys have already looked at that deal. And the reason that's important because we return to the marketplace because it's so important for venture capital and private equity if we're running businesses and we're looking to expand or sell, or we're making a presentation to investors. We really have to understand the challenges of the marketplace. So what I want to do is I'd like to talk a little bit about the SVB case. And if you have your PowerPoints, I'm using Luca's screen because it's better than my laptop. I'm going to start with slide 19 in the presentation, and we'll go through, maybe take 15, 20 minutes or so talking about this. And then I want to talk about the final exam. We'll make a schedule for next Tuesday, and then we should be done with the lecture. And then, of course, if you guys have any questions, I want to make sure we save time to talk about that. Okay. So let's turn to what happened with the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, which is a very interesting event because it wasn't isolated to just the bank in the United States. It had a direct impact on Credit Suisse, as we saw. And when this event happened, many on Wall Street, the first thing that they talked about was we have to stop another Lehman Brothers from happening. And it was very interesting. Now, this happened in March. We're several months past it, and we can kind of evaluate this event and say, we see that the lessons we learned from the Lehman Brothers really helped contain the spread of this financial crisis. Because at the time, back in March, governments, businesses were saying, if we don't act quickly to contain this, we will have another Lehman Brothers, which will cause a global financial collapse. So for this reason, let's kind of return to this and take a closer look at what happened in Silicon Valley. Because interestingly enough, some of the same mistakes that were made by SVB were the same mistakes that management with Lehman Brothers made back when the global financial crisis occurred several years earlier. So let's talk a little bit. What happened? On the 10th of March, earlier this year, federal regulators, American regulators, took control of the bank. They basically went in, seized the bank, and closed it. And so at the time this happened, how big was SVB? It was the 16th largest bank in the US at the time it was seized, and it was the second largest bank failure in US banking history. And it was the largest banking failure since Lehman Brothers in the global financial crisis in 2008. And that's why this caught everybody's attention. That's why when we look at venture capital, new firms, M&As, this really threw the financial markets into chaos for several months. And at the time that this bank failed, SVB was the leading bank of the tech sector. So when we talk about Silicon Valley, you guys know throughout the class, we've looked at case studies involving tech companies that started in Silicon Valley. This bank was the number one bank where startups, where tech companies went in order to get investment capital. So this is why this bank failure was so important to, the M&A and especially the tech industry. So before we talk about the failure, let's say a few words about the history of what happened with SVB, because the history is kind of interesting. So this was a bank that was founded in 1989 in California. And it was created with a very specific business strategy. And the strategy was that it was going to provide financial resources, financial services, focusing on the tech sector. You know, they started in Menlo Park, which is Silicon Valley, and they said, we're going to have a business strategy where we're going to target our services to startups, to venture capitalists, for tech companies. And that was their strategy. And it was a good strategy because in a very short period of time, the bank grew to be one of the largest commercial banks in the US. And it eventually expanded and provided all sorts of financial services to its customers. But it specialized in startups and venture capital-backed firms in the tech sector. And we remember from our prior discussion on VCs, we remember that these are the investors that take on a lot of risk. They invest in maybe 10 companies and hope that 9 will, they hope that 9 will, you know, they expect 9 will fail, but they want the one company to succeed. And that's their investment strategy. And so this has been a strategy that worked very well for SVP, and it's why it grew. And so in 2019, we remember, right before the pandemic, and as the pandemic hit, it started a period from 2019 to 2022 where Silicon Valley Bank experienced its highest and most profitable growth rate in the industry. And if we go back to that period of time, we remember that interest rates were low. It was easy to access capital. There was the pandemic, yes, but throughout the pandemic, more or less, the central banks in the US and Europe kept interest rates low. Remember, we're putting a lot of money into the economy. And in fact, in 2022, SVP achieved a really important milestone. And the milestone was that 44% of all of the IPOs in the US, for example, tech companies, healthcare companies, 44% of all of the IPOs on Wall Street were clients of Silicon Valley Bank. So they had entered this unprecedented period of success. Much the same way, if we're thinking about Lehman Brothers, we want to kind of think about this for purposes of this discussion. We remember that before Lehman Brothers failed, it also experienced these high rates of profit dealing with free money and all of these high risk loans that they were earning a lot of return on. And so what happened that led to the failure? So we saw a period of rapid growth. And, you know, their SVB is growing from 19 to 22. They were taking in a lot of deposits. They had a lot of assets. They had a lot of clients. And so with that, what did they do? They basically, instead of holding cash, they started to put money into the bond market, US Treasury bonds, and other long-term, what we call long-term debt instruments. And so usually for banks, this is where it gets very interesting. Usually for a bank, it's good to invest in bonds because bonds are considered longer-term investments, less risk, but they have a lower rate of return. Usually when you buy a bond, 10-year bond, 5-year bond, you're going to have a lower rate of a return, but it's considered a safe investment because you're investing in a government-backed, debt obligation. And so when interest rates are low, what happens? You're buying bonds that have a low interest rate of return because the cost of borrowing money is low. The government says we're going to also pay a low rate of return. Remember, they're long-term investments. So in March of 2022, something very interesting happens. Silicon Valley Bank had been putting all of its cash into these long-term US Treasury bonds, long-term investments, short return, small interest rates. So what happens? The Federal Reserve, the central bank, starts raising interest rates, okay? And what happens when the central bank starts raising interest rates? It means that when you're buying bonds, you're going to get a higher rate of return. But if the government starts raising interest rates when I'm already holding treasury bonds at a lower rate, it means that if I don't do something to adjust my portfolio, I'm going to lose money. Because it is, as we see, what happens. So let's kind of take a review here, because this is really important, especially if you're a business and you're thinking of, do I want to invest in bonds, securities? What are our strategies? So just by recap, when interest rates are low, treasury bonds, and we could say similar type of debt instruments, are considered really good investments because they provide a very fixed, very safe, very stable investment compared to other investments that you have. So when interest rates are low, people tend to look at treasury bonds or ECB bonds, for example, as good investments. Okay. And when interest rates are low, the value of an existing bond with higher yields increases. And so this is considered something that's very beneficial for investors who buy bonds that have longer maturities, because they can lock in a higher yield for a longer period of time. So if my interest rate is 1% and the cost of borrowing money is going to stay at 1%, I might want to invest in a treasury bond, because if it's paying me a 3% return for a fixed period of time, that's a better investment. Okay. So this is why when interest rates are low by central banks, investors and banks want to usually buy bonds because they're considered good investments. However, what happens when central banks start raising their interest rates? This is interesting, because when interest rates start increasing, when they become higher, treasury bonds or government bonds, similar debt instruments, become bad investments, because they're offering a fixed rate of return that is lower than the prevailing market interest rate. So on the one hand, when the central bank's interest rates are low, a bond is a good investment because you're getting a rate of return that's higher than the prevailing market. But when the central bank starts raising interest rates, your bond investment becomes a bad investment, because your rate of return is lower than what the prevailing market is offering. So let's look at this. So for an example, let me give you an example, and this is in the material that we have for today's lesson. If an investor, say, buys a bond with a fixed rate of 2%, okay, I have a fixed bond, 10 years at 2%, but interest rates from the central bank rise to 5%. I'm holding this debt instrument for 2%, but now interest rates are 5%. I'm locked into this lower rate of 2%. I'm losing money because the prevailing market rate is now 5%. As the interest rate rises, the value of my existing bond is going to become lower. Okay. And so with the yield decreasing, basically it can result in a loss if the bond is sold before maturity. So now we have this situation, so we kind of come back and we look at Silicon Valley, where they're holding a lot of debt in these debt instruments, these bonds. They say interest rates are rising. So what happened? So SVB has a lot of assets tied up in these bonds, and the Fed starts raising interest rates. And what happens? The value of the bonds start to go down that SVB is holding, because investors could buy bonds at a higher interest rate. So SVB's customers, many of whom are in the tech industry, experienced this economic downturn. They started to get challenged for cash and money. And so what happens? They come to the bank and they say, we need to make a withdrawal. We need to take our money out because of the economy. Our costs are going up. Inflation is up. We need to start pulling money out of the bank. But the bank has all of its assets tied up in these bonds. Okay. So what happens? SVB had to start getting money to give to the customers who were taking money out of their account. So how did they do this? They started selling their bonds. They started selling the treasury bonds because they had to raise money. Okay. And they had to sell them prematurely because they had to sell them before the maturity date. And so what happens if they had to cash in their bonds and sell their bonds before the maturity date? They started to lose a lot of money. And because of this, because they were over invested in treasury bonds, they started to lose money because they had to start selling them. And this resulted in a loss of 1.9 billion in SVB assets. Okay. And this is what we call when they were forced to start turning in their treasury bonds. This is when we call it the beginning of the end for the bank. And once the bank had to announce the loss of its bond portfolio on the 8th of March, when this all started really coming forward, guess what happened? Then the customers start to panic. They start to say, oh my God, the bank's going to fail. And so we have this panic that sets in where everybody's coming and trying to take their money out of Silicon Valley Bank. And within a matter of days, the bank basically failed. And so what happened? Okay. In 2018, we have this Dodd-Frank, and if you haven't studied it in other courses, and we might have talked about it in business law, I can't recall offhand, but this was the big law passed in the United States, more or less after Lehman Brothers, to try to, regulate investment firms and banks and prevent them from engaging in these very risky speculative practices. And so in 2018, before this crisis with SVB had occurred, the law was changed, basically raising the regulatory threshold to banks. And what that means is, we raised the threshold to 250 billion in assets from 50 billion. So what does that mean? That means that you have to have 250 billion in assets before a lot of the oversight, a lot of the checking that the government does to make sure you're not engaging in bad behavior. So it used to be that if a bank had 50 billion in assets, many of the regulations of this Dodd-Frank law would apply. But a year before, 2019, when SVB started on this roller coaster, the federal government raised the threshold, which meant that a lot of what SVB was able to do was not subject to a lot of federal oversight and regulation. Okay, and why did the U.S. government do this? Well, they wanted to try to relieve smaller businesses, smaller banks from a lot of the regulations that were very expensive and made it difficult for them to operate. And so we kind of come back to this idea of the moral hazard, where we say we want banks to have financial flexibility. We understand it's very costly when they have to comply with all of these government regulations. But on the other side, these regulations are important because they help protect the public, customers. And it's this balancing. But in this particular case, the government decided to relax regulations in order to make it less expensive for banks to authorize. And so why was there this panic that set in? So in the US, the banking system, there's a similar rule here in Europe, many European countries. The government only guarantees or insures up to 250,000, okay? And so if you have money in a bank, the government is going to protect 250,000 of that money. Anything above that amount is basically, you have taken the risk and the government won't protect that. So if a bank fails, you can recover 250,000. That's protected or insured by the government. Anything above that amount is lost. Okay. So as this panic starts to happen, people are saying, oh my God, especially the big businesses and the tech companies that have much more than 250,000 with SVB, they start panicking and they say, oh my God, we better pull our money out quick while the bank still has assets. And so in this particular situation, the US government, knowing what could happen from the Lehman Brothers experience, stepped in immediately and said, we are going to basically, we're going to step in. We are going to take control of this situation to calm fears. And so basically, the government stepped in, protected all of the deposits, and basically what they did, in a long story short, to stop another Lehman Brothers from happening, they said, your deposits are protected, but we are going to force that SVB sell its assets to another bank. And the bank ultimately was a bank called First Citizens Bank. And in this particular case, SVB had assets worth 72 billion at the time of this sale. But the First Citizens Bank, the bank that the government basically recruited and encouraged to buy the bank, bought the assets for 55 billion, which was basically a discount of approximately 29%. So in this particular case, another bank was recruited by the government to step in to buy the assets to try to stop the fear from spreading. And for the most part, it worked, because now the government was able to stop the much larger spread and fear and contain, for the most part, the failure of Silicon Valley. There was some money lost, but for the most part, most of the customers, most of the investors were able to retain the majority of their portfolio, which prevented a larger panic from happening. So what we see in the SVB case is, kind of a recognition on the part of the government of what could happen and the need to step in very quickly to stop the contagion, and also kind of re-looking at, maybe we need to have more regulation in place to protect, or to regulate banking industry. So this was kind of an interesting scenario. But when I said they contained the spread of fear, they did to a point. However, what happened with SVB in America really set off the failure of Credit Suisse here in Europe. And the experience in SVB really, basically encouraged the failure and the collapse of Credit Suisse. So Credit Suisse was the second largest bank in Switzerland, and it collapsed basically in March of 2023. And similarly, when this panic and fear started happening, in this particular case, we saw the active involvement of the Swiss government. Once customers started pulling their money out of Credit Suisse, the government stepped in, the Swiss government, and basically encouraged UBS, the second bank in Switzerland, to basically buy Credit Suisse. And it was bought at a huge discount of $3.3 billion. And we'll just take a quick look at this final part of the SVP experience of this year, which is when it had the impact it did on the European and the Swiss banking system. The transaction of recruiting UBS to buy Credit Suisse was intended to try to stabilize the global financial system and prevent a total collapse. But at the end of the day, there were many negative things about this transaction, but it did help to stop the spread globally of what happened earlier this year in Silicon Valley. The Credit Suisse experience, just a couple comments about this, and we'll be done with this, but it basically was an old bank. It was founded in 1856. It was one of the leading financial institutions in Switzerland. And at the end of 2022, Credit Suisse had assets of almost 1.5 trillion. It employed over 50,000 people, and it had 150 offices in over 50 countries throughout the world. So Credit Suisse had a very big, in fact, here in Italy too, and especially in Milan, Credit Suisse had a very, very big footprint. Its problems were a little different than SVB, and the problems were with the top management. The people who were running Credit Suisse were involved in a variety of different financial scandals. And in fact, during the pandemic, Credit Suisse saw the collapse of two major investment funds that caused approximately 1 billion in losses. And when an independent investigation was done, they found that basically Credit Suisse had failed to manage the risk for at least one of the two of these funds that they were involved with. And so once these bad, events started becoming public, customers of Credit Suisse had similar reaction to SVP. They started to lose confidence in the bank, and they started to withdraw their money and their deposits. And so this caused a similar problem, because when customers start taking their money out of the bank, Credit Suisse needed to be liquid to give the customers their money. And so this run of customers pulling their money out had caused a liquidity problem with Credit Suisse. So before their collapse in early 23, they announced a plan where they were going to borrow 54 billion to stabilize itself in the short term. And its main backer, however, at the time was Saudi National Bank. And what Saudi National Bank didn't like about this is that they were worried that they didn't want somebody to step in front of them in terms of having a priority to be repaid. And so Saudi National Bank got involved, and they said, wait a minute, if you borrow money, we don't want anybody to have a priority over us to be repaid. We've loaned money, we've invested in your bank. We are not going to loan Credit Suisse any more money. So this additionally caused a panic. And ultimately, what happened, making a long story short, SVP collapsed on the 10th of March. And, the SVB collapse on March 10th, in addition to all of these other things, ended up having a direct impact on Credit Suisse. Because within days, with all these other things happening, the Swiss regulators seized control of Credit Suisse and basically forced a merger with UBS. What's really interesting about this particular transaction, which has been really criticized in financial circles, UBS purchased Credit Suisse for about 10% of its market value, basically 3.3 billion. And basically, this was a deep, deep discount that the Swiss government basically engineered, okay? And so we look more closely at this acquisition, the acquisition by UBS that was encouraged by the Swiss government has been really criticized, mainly because the Swiss regulator stepped in and gave what the market considered and critics considered overly favorable terms to UBS, okay? And one of the main things that happened, and many think this is because the Saudis were involved, when you have stock and you have bonds, usually people in the priority of whose obligation has the right to be repaid first, we call this the order of preference. Usually a debt instrument, like a bond, is paid before a shareholder's investment. So you pay the bondholders first because this is considered a low risk. It's a debt obligation, you pay it. If I own stock or shares, it's considered a more risky investment because I'm not loaning the company money. I'm becoming basically an owner. My share represents an ownership interest. It's a higher risk, but I could get a dividend and a higher return. So usually in a transaction like this, you pay the bondholders first, and the people that own shares, they're considered high risk investments, and whatever's left over, you can divide that to pay the shareholders. However, in this particular deal, basically the Swiss government, and based on the terms of the deal, especially when you're in a bankruptcy, you pay the bondholders first and then the shareholders. In this deal, the shareholders were paid before the bondholders. And this was subject to a lot of criticism. And most of the criticism has been that the Swiss government did this to appease the Saudi bank and their investment in Credit Suisse to keep them supportive of this forced transaction. And so at the end of the day, based on this transaction, what was really the bad part of this deal is that if you were a shareholder with Credit Suisse, you will receive one UBS share for every 22 Credit Suisse shares, basically. And so you're being paid back before the bondholders. And basically Credit Suisse stock, after you get a fraction of your money back, was going to be delisted. And, so you lost a lot of money. However, Saudi National Bank had a higher risk investment, but they didn't lose the money. Their investment basically was protected in this transaction, and that's why this deal was subject to criticism. It stopped the spread of a bigger panic in the global market, but the deal was criticized because it gave favorable treatment over many other investors to the largest investor, which was Saudi National Bank. And so for this reason, Switzerland, which has long been considered, basically one of the global banking centers, now only has one bank, one financial institution, UBS, and its reputation, most commentators in the financial markets, speculate that the reputation of Swiss as a banking center, a global banking center, has been damaged. And it remains to be seen what will happen in the future. But in these two examples from the last year, we see what's happened. We had the government intervene with Silicon Valley. We had another government intervene with Credit Suisse. And basically, we see extraordinary things being done by the government to prevent a larger spread of the damage like we saw in 2008 with Lehman Brothers. And so what are some of the things to just conclude this discussion? What have we learned from Lehman Brothers to today with Credit Suisse and Silicon Valley? We've learned that risk management is important, that banks need to make money, they need to make good investments, but they have to manage their risk. So in the case of Credit Suisse, for example, when interest rates started going up, the bank needed to start immediately rebalancing its portfolio, doing things to make sure that it wasn't completely invested in bonds when interest rates are going up that were going to dilute the value of their assets. So that's obviously an important lesson we see again and again, that risk management in the financial sector is appropriate. Another question, we look at Dodd-Frank and the Swiss system, is there need for more government regulation of the investment firms and the banking industries that make money available for the capital markets? It's kind of a yes and a no, because the more the government regulates, the more expensive it becomes for financial institutions and investors. And the more expensive it comes for them, ultimately, the less capital is available for business. So this is a balance that we need to find. Another lesson that is obvious, that we need to have always good corporate governance. We look at this with an M&A. When we take over a company, when we integrate a company, we see time and time again that it's important to have a strong management structure in place to make sure that we are operating in a very stable way. And lastly, we need to have a contingency plan in the financial market. So if you're a financial institution, or a company that's involved where you have debt that you're managing, you always need to have a plan for what you will do if interest rates start going up, if there's a panic. All of this reinforces that, we learned lessons. We were able to stop the greater spread of a big financial crisis this year, but we see, bad decision-making, poor management can cause these kind of global crises to happen very quickly. And one of the things, just finally, that was very interesting from this, which encouraged the governments to intervene very, very quickly, was a recognition that with technology, with communication today, with electronic trading, for example, the spread happens instantly because we're so connected. And so governments were much quicker to intervene and react this time than in 2008, when the world was certainly connected, but not in the way we're connected today. So this is kind of the final comment when we look at the financial markets where VCs have to operate. And this kind of gives us a point of reference when we look at what have we learned from the Lehman Brothers collapse. Can these situations still happen today? And what are the likely responses of governments when these occur? So this is kind of the final piece of the lecture today. Unless you guys have any questions on this, what I'd like to do is spend the last few minutes of class talking about our final exam for next week. And, we can maybe establish a schedule now for when you guys will present. You're each going to present your final individually. Each is scheduled for about 30 minutes, and you'll do it one by one. So we can start at 10 or 10:30, and we'll go until we finish. So if we start at 10:30, then we'll have the next at 11 or 11:30. But I'd like to, get them done during the time that we have set aside for class. So first question is, do you guys have any questions about the process of the final exam, the assignment itself, what you're supposed to present and analyze? Either Leonardo or Filippo, do you guys have any questions?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. So next is what time? So any time from between 10 and 1 o'clock. Your final exam will be 30 minutes with the presentation. what time would you guys like to, let's go ahead and make a schedule now, and I'll follow up and send Sophia an email and ask her what time would you guys like to present?
Whatever you want.
Okay, I will be here at 10 o'clock, so I'll be ready to go at 10:30. Who would like to?
Leo, vuoi andare prima tu o prima io? Martedì prossimo.
Allora, io se non vado cioè per me è uguale,
Anche per
però
me.
se non vado per primo arrivo su con un po' più calma.
Fai che allora vado prima. A parte che potremmo arrivare tutte e due, tipo per le 10, poi lì per lì. Prima.
Yeah, and one
Vabbè,
can
sì,
wait.
anche
If you
facciamo
guys
così,
wanna
dai.
arrive together, somebody can wait, because we'll do it in the library. Somebody can wait in the other.
Get
Okay,
a
okay.
coffee, something like that, and then they present. Yeah, it's fine.
Ok,
Okay.
facciamo così.
Yeah, I mean,
10:30? You guys wanna arrive at
Yeah.
10:30? And
we get
okay,
Okay.
there at 30 and then we
all right, and then you guys can decide who wants to go first, and then who wants to go second, okay?
Yes.
What I want you to do is I want you to email me your slides. Just email them that morning is fine. If you email them to me in the morning before you start is fine. Okay?
Okay.
Ok.
All right, any other questions, you guys? If you need anything comes up during the week before finals, let me know, send me an email. We can schedule a time to do a video call if you need help with anything. Just let me know and we'll find a time to connect. Otherwise, I will see you both next Tuesday here at campus at 10:30.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you,
All right,
Lisa.
thanks, guys. Have a great day. I'll see you next Tuesday.
You too.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.